Thank you for listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, where we discuss all the news in the world of basketball, NBA, college, high school, whatever it may be. My name is Ben Brown. Once again, thank you for listening and joining me here on the show today. It is another great day. It is Friday, March 10th. We are 2 days away from Selection Sunday. I am definitely looking forward to this Sunday, looking at the NCAA tournament. I'm one of those guys that only fills out one bracket because I believe if you're doing more than one, you're kind of cheating the system. Nobody's going to fill out a perfect bracket anyways. You might as well fill out one, go with what your gut instincts are, pick some upsets because there's always going to be them. Although you can't always predict them, there's going to be upsets, so pick them and just kind of go with what you feel and what you believe. I'm going to be filling mine out probably Sunday night, maybe Monday morning. Definitely excited for the NCAA tournament. It's my favorite thing in sports. Thursday and Friday, and even the weekend on Saturday and Sunday ought to be fantastic. So, nevertheless, we'll wait to talk about college basketball for just a little bit. We're going to start off in the NBA, as we always do, talking about games last night, as well as previewing this weekend's games, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So let's talk about last night. First of all, we have the Clippers and the Grizzlies. The Clippers go on the road to defeat Memphis 114-98. CP3 had 19.7 assists and 4 rebounds. Marc Gasol 20 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists in the loss. The Blazers go to overtime to defeat the Philadelphia 76ers 114-108. Big win there for Portland as they battle for the 8th seed in the Western Conference. Jusuf Nurkic in the victory for Portland. 28 points, 20 rebounds, and 8 assists. Dario Saric in the loss for the Sixers. 28 points and 9 rebounds. Good game there from Saric. The Lakers win on the road against the Phoenix Suns 122-110. And D'Angelo Russell had 28 points in the victory. And now let's get to the two bigger games of last night. Start off with the Oklahoma City Thunder. They defeat the San Antonio Spurs 102-92. Russell Westbrook gets his 31st triple-double of the season. That is second most all-time in a single season. It ties him with Wilt Chamberlain. Of course, Oscar Robertson had 40, I believe. Russell Westbrook needing 9 more to accomplish that. I'm sure he will break that record for having the most triple-doubles in a single season. And then really it depends on me for the MVP if he's going to average a triple-double or not. I feel like if you do something that only one other person in the history of the league has ever done, you probably need to reward that person with the Most Valuable Player award. Although I do think that James Harden's probably a better candidate for me. You have LeBron James, who's having a fantastic year, averaging 26, 8, and 8. Kawhi Leonard, what he's doing defensively and offensively has been fantastic as well. So it's going to be interesting. I feel like this is one of the closest MVP races we've had in the NBA for a while, and I think it's going to be really interesting to look at who is going to come out on top on that. But nevertheless, Russell Westbrook did have 23 points, 13 rebounds, and 13 assists last night. Only 3 turnovers as well, which is kind of low for Russ. He did shoot 7 of 21, so not the greatest, but his team does get it done and get a 10-point victory. The Spurs were coming off of a back-to-back. They played Sacramento the night before. They had to overcome a 28-point deficit to beat the Kings, which they did. It was in the first half. Kawhi Leonard and LaMarcus Aldridge were rested for that game. So playing here tonight, or I guess last night I should say, the Spurs really just did not shoot well. They shot 41%, only 31% from 3, something they don't necessarily do too much of. They had 14 turnovers as a team. So the Spurs kind of just didn't play that great of a game. I know Greg Popovich is not too sold on that, although with how the Warriors have been struggling without Kevin Durant recently, I felt like the game against the Thunder last night was a big loss for them to try and get that number 1 seed. Depending on how important they view it, right now they are 2 games back of the Warriors as the top seed in the Western Conference. And let's get to the other top seed in the Eastern Conference. That's the Cleveland Cavaliers. They lose yet again, their 3rd loss in a row now. They lose to the Detroit Pistons 106-101. The Cavs have now lost 5 out of their last 7 games, and even LeBron James and his triple-double of 29 points, 13 rebounds, and 10 assists were not enough for the Cavs to defeat the Detroit Pistons on the road last night. They did get J.R. Smith back in the game. He played 19 minutes. He had 3 points. He did literally typical J.R. Smith stuff. He shot 1 of 9 from the field, 1 of 8 from 3, and he had a plus or minus of minus 28, by far the worst of any player in the game. Typical J.R. Smith, right? Comes right back in, launches up 8 threes, makes 1 of them. Cavs only shoot 28% from the three-point line. Kyrie Irving did have 27 points, 5 rebounds, but only 3 assists in the game. Played 40 minutes, took 22 shots. Not really distributing the ball at all. He only had 3 assists, as I said. So the Cavaliers now, I guess you can say because the Celtics are struggling as well, it's not too bad. They still have a 2-game lead in the Eastern Conference, but in their last 10 games are 5-5, and they've lost 5 out of the last 7, currently on a 3-game losing streak. Not too good for Cleveland. Brought in Andrew Bogut. He, of course, broke his leg and is now out for the season, literally within a minute of making his debut for the team. Darren Williams has been the backup there last couple of games now, and it hasn't really worked out especially well. I mean, he only played 17 minutes last night, had 4 points and 3 assists, so it's not terrible. But I mean, he only took 1 shot in 17 minutes. I think D. Will's got to be doing a lot more than that if he wants to be a big contributor on this Cavaliers team. And I mean, it is still the regular season. Of course, when they get to the postseason, I think things will get a lot more tight. I'm sure LeBron will take over a lot more and not necessarily worry too much. He's really just trying to get towards the postseason. But, I mean, nevertheless, the Cavs do drop last night. Andre Drummond had a great game in the victory last night, though. He had 20 points and 16 rebounds. So now let's look at the games on the NBA schedule from tonight, Saturday, as well as Sunday. The Magic will take on the Hornets. The Houston Rockets will battle against the Chicago Bulls. The Pacers will be in Milwaukee to take on the Greek Freak and the rest of the Milwaukee Bucks. The Warriors, without KD, will be on the road taking on the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Toronto Raptors will be playing the Atlanta Hawks. The Boston Celtics will be in Denver to take on the Nuggets. The Nets will battle the Mavericks, and the Washington Wizards will be in Sacramento to take on the Kings, who have lost 6 games in a row now. On Saturday, the Jazz will take on the Thunder. The 76ers will battle against the Clippers. The Knicks will take on the Pistons. The Pelicans will battle the Hornets. The Cleveland Cavaliers will look to right the ship against the Orlando Magic. They'll be in Orlando for that game on Saturday. The T-Wolves will take on the Milwaukee Bucks. The Toronto Raptors will battle the Miami Heat, who have had just a miraculous turnaround. I think the Heat have won 20 of their last 24 games. What they're doing is fantastic. They're on a 13-game winning streak. They're competing for the 8th seed in the West, and it's definitely a very, very fun thing to look at. The Miami Heat, I hope they do get in. It'll be a nice story. On Saturday, the big headliner is the Golden State Warriors taking on the San Antonio Spurs in San Antonio. This ought to be a great, great game. Big game to decide who might get the number 1 seed out there in the West. Not sure if the Spurs were maybe looking forward to this game a little too much before playing the Thunder last night. But the game is in San Antonio, so I would give the Spurs the edge for that game tomorrow. The Hawks will battle the Grizzlies on Saturday. The Suns will take on the Mavericks. The Wizards will be in Portland and take on the Trailblazers. And then the Nuggets will be on the road taking on the Sacramento Kings. And then for Sunday, we do have a few games on the schedule. The Bulls will battle the Celtics. The Knicks will take on the Nets. The Heat will take on the Pacers. The Blazers will lock up against the Suns. The Cavs will be in Houston and take on the Rockets. And the 76ers will be in LA to take on the Los Angeles Lakers. We'll take our first break of the show. After the break, we're going to talk about college basketball. A lot of great news within college basketball. Arizona have landed yet another 5-star recruit. Talk about who that is. Talk about some games. We have the conference tournament games going on. We're in the quarterfinals and semifinals for a lot of the big conferences. A lot of storylines. And tonight we have Duke versus North Carolina, the rubber match, the 3rd game of this season in the semifinals of the ACC tournament. We'll talk about all that news and more right after the break at the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back into the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. We're talking some college basketball conference tournaments. We have the big conference tournaments. We have the ACC, the SEC, the Big Ten, the Big 12. A lot of these are in the quarterfinal and semifinals of their respective tournaments. It's going to be really fun to see what happens because we have a lot of bubble teams. We have a lot of bubble teams that are close, maybe needing some more wins. Teams potentially like Michigan, teams like Michigan State in the Big Ten. Seems like maybe Michigan State, in order to keep their 19 year in a row in the NCAA tournament streak going on, they might need to win it all in the Big Ten, and they're playing fantastic. They're going to be taking on Minnesota today in the quarterfinal. Minnesota, a team that only had one more win within conference play than did Michigan State, so it's another very winnable game for the Spartans. They're really going to need that going in order to advance and get into the NCAA tournament. I'm sure there will be a little bit of biasness towards Michigan State when the committee looks at who gets in, some of these maybe last four teams, if they believe they're on the bubble, on the fringe. It is close. Some of the other storylines, as I mentioned, we do have Duke and North Carolina, the third matchup tonight, renewing their rivalry. It is in the semifinal of the ACC tournament because Duke did defeat number 10 Louisville 81-77 last night, and then UNC absolutely rolled right through Miami 78-53. That ought to be a great, great matchup tonight. I would give the edge to North Carolina. They were the regular season ACC champions. Justin Jackson and company should be able to roll through Duke in my eyes, but Duke did beat them this year once already. That game was at Cameron Indoor Stadium. This game, of course, is a little different at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn where the Nets play. So it's a neutral court. There's no home court advantage, but I will take UNC to advance in to the ACC championship game. They will be taking on the winner of the Florida State game and the Florida State Seminoles. They'll be playing later today to advance into the ACC championship game after their victory last night against Virginia Tech. They won 74-68. The number 16 Seminoles got 17 points out of Deion Bacon. Played really, really well for them last night. So Florida State tonight, they'll be taking on Notre Dame in the semifinal there in the ACC. So the winner of Florida State, Notre Dame, and UNC and Duke will be winning the ACC tournament. Again, the automatic qualifier. Although all four of these teams will automatically just be in, whether they're at-large teams or not. The ACC is so good this year in college basketball, getting a lot of teams. They could easily get 10 teams, 7 or 8 of them for sure. I would not be surprised whatsoever if they got all those teams in to the NCAA tournament. So, some other storylines. Last night we did have number 1 Kansas lose. They did lose in the Big 12 tournament to TCU. So the number 1 seed Kansas Jayhawks are bounced early, although they did win the Big 12 regular season championship. They lost 85-82 to TCU. Nice win there for TCU. They're not going to be getting into the big dance unless they go all the way and win in the Big 12 tournament. This was the quarterfinals, so they are in the semifinals now. So there's a possibility that it could be the case. That would also take another spot away from an at-large team because nobody expected TCU to get in. So that's the one thing I do have a problem with in college basketball is how we have the automatic qualifying teams that win the conference championship. There's teams like these mid-majors that the only shot they have to get in to the big dance is to win their conference championship tournament. And I really don't agree with that. We have this debate every single year because what are you telling these kids matters in the regular season? You're telling them literally nothing matters in the regular season because no matter how good you play, Whatever happens in the conference tournament is all that matters. I'd much rather see the team that wins the regular season championship, the automatic team into the big dance. But the problem is money. These schools get a ton of money from these conference championship games. You have neutral courts, like in these big tournaments, or for instance, is the mid-majors. You have the courts that maybe get a lot of people into them with the most ticket sales, the most revenue, because it's all about money. That's what drives everything. So I really don't agree with that, although that is the case. It is really, really unfortunate that the teams that win the regular season championship don't get in if they don't win their conference tournament, because you're telling them all that really matters is these last few games, the games that matter in the conference tournament, because the regular season doesn't really mean anything, because you could be as good as you want or as bad as you want, and it won't make a difference whether you get into the tournament unless you win that conference championship tournament, which is really, really unfortunate. I don't see it changing anytime soon because, I mean, there's too much money in it. And even the NCAA tournament, there's a ton of money in it. I would maybe even prefer to see the best 68 teams in general in the conference, or I'm sorry, in the NCAA tournament, because you get a lot more competitiveness, although it doesn't make as much storylines as the upsets in the mid-majors, making the deep runs and all that fun stuff. But it might just make it look for even a better situation. So when you're looking at tonight in college basketball, we still have the tournaments, of course. You have number 12 SMU taking on East Carolina in the American Athletic Conference quarterfinal. Michigan, they are making a lot of headlines because they're having to wear their practice uniforms to play these games. So when they were getting into Washington, D.C. at the Verizon Center where the Washington Wizards play is where the Big Ten tournament is being held. When they were flying in, their plane skidded across the tarmac, and like everything's okay, but their plane kind of like not necessarily crashed, but had a little incident there. And their luggage is being forced to stay on the plane while an investigation is going on. So Michigan are having to wear their practice uniforms during games. Last night didn't make much of a difference because in the second round of the Big Ten tournament they did defeat Illinois. But it's going to be a lot tougher tonight as they take on number 13 Purdue and Caleb Swanigan and company. The big man, Caleb Swanigan for Purdue, is averaging 18 points, 12 rebounds, about 3 assists. Going to be really, really tough there. Number 8, Kentucky played Georgia in the SEC tournament quarterfinal. Number 2, Villanova will take on Seton Hall in the Big East semifinal out there at MSG in New York. Number 24, Wisconsin will battle against Indiana in the quarterfinal of the Big Ten. We have number 23, Iowa State against TCU in the semifinals. Have to see if TCU can pull off another upset there in Missouri. We have Duke and North Carolina, of course. Number 17, Florida taking on Vanderbilt. Number 15, Cincinnati against Tulsa. Northwestern could be making history on Sunday, and quite honestly, I think they will. It will be their first ever time getting into the NCAA tournament in school history. Yesterday, they defeated Rutgers 83-61, in due part to a 31-0 run in the first half. You'd imagine that a team like Rutgers, which is not the greatest, but you'd imagine they would somehow get fouled driving to the basket, or maybe get a shot to fall, or a rebound falls right to you, or something to stop a 31-0 run. But that was the case with Northwestern. Out there in the Pac-12 on the West Coast, really excited here for the semifinal matchups. We have Cal and number 5 Oregon. Cal, a true bubble team right now. If they could top number 5 Oregon and get into that Pac-12 title game, that'd be a huge, huge step in the right direction if they want to try and get in to the NCAA tournament. The other semifinal matchup will be UCLA against Arizona. These two teams split the season series in each other's home courts, so the third matchup here ought to be a doozy. We have Kansas State against number 11 West Virginia in the other semifinal of the Big 12 title game. And it's really just about it. I mean, the other games I mentioned already, UCLA and Arizona, and Notre Dame and Florida State. So a lot of great storylines here in college basketball. Always really, really excited. Sunday ought to be great. On Monday on the show, we're definitely going to be debating the bubble teams, who got in and who didn't, who should have got in, who should have not got in. Break down the tournaments, break down some of the potential upsets come Thursday and Friday. It's going to be really, really great, and I am very, very excited for the NCAA tournament. But we'll take our last break on the show. After the break, we're going to talk about news within basketball. I teased it a little earlier. Arizona landed yet another 5-star recruit. We have DeMarcus Cousins and the whole New Orleans Pelicans thing going on. Were the Kings maybe a little smart to trade Cousins? It's still early, but we'll talk about that and more right after the break here at the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So Jared Dudley of the Suns and newly acquired point guard of the Washington Wizards, Brandon Jennings, were each fined $35,000 for their role in an altercation on Tuesday night's game in Phoenix. The Wizards did win that game 131 to 127. So basically, Dudley was fined for escalating an altercation. He confronted a headbutt towards Wizards Jason Smith after Smith knocked down the Suns' small point guard Tyler Ulis with a hard screen. And then Jennings was fined for making menacing gestures during that incident. So video replay showed Jennings imitating that his fingers were a gun. Both players were ejected in the first quarter of this game, so they've each been fined $35,000. And another guy who's been fined that, honestly, he literally just donates to the NBA seemingly every single month. And that's DeMarcus Cousins. The all-star forward for the New Orleans Pelicans was fined $50,000 for 2 separate instances of inappropriate language directed towards fans. I'm not going to repeat what Boogie Cousins did say, but basically after a loss to the Jazz, Cousins responded to a heckler in the stands by saying something that was recorded on a cell phone that forced him to be fined $50,000. So, I mean, fans always heckle players, and it happens all the time. But in every single arena, they have security where the player could say, hey, that guy's like giving me a lot of crap. Can you like tell him to basically shut up or get out or, whatever. This sort of stuff happens all the time. But that is not what happened. Boogie Cousins is definitely not a guy who's afraid to say what's on his mind. And, I've kind of been thinking about this the last couple of days, given how the Pelicans have started out under the DeMarcus Cousins era. And I realize it's still really early. Anthony Davis did miss the game the other night with a wrist injury, although x-rays were negative, so he's kind of listed as day-to-day. So we'll have to monitor how that situation goes in the next couple of days. But how has the trade kind of worked out so far? It's still really, really early. I don't think the Pelicans are done moving pieces. Of course, they need to bring in more players, get some shooters around these 2 big guys. But so far, it hasn't really worked out. I mean, the Kings have lost 6 games in a row after winning their first game without DeMarcus Cousins. And you'd imagine that they would lose a lot of games given the fact that they're simply just not a good team. DeMarcus Cousins was head and shoulders above their best other player on the team, which you might is probably Darren Collison right now. And they're just simply not a good team. They started fresh without Cousins. The regime kind of changed model, try to get young, get some young pieces, get a higher draft pick, and kind of just start to develop this team at the start of next season. The summer is really what they're looking forward to. And for the Pelicans, kind of the other way around, trying to obviously push towards making this team relevant again and building pieces around Anthony Davis and now Cousins. But it's still really, really early, as I mentioned. But it hasn't really worked out so far. The Pelicans have won 2 games since making the trade, one of which DeMarcus Cousins was suspended for after picking up his 18th technical foul against the Oklahoma City Thunder. So it got me wondering, and I realize it's really early and I'm not going to jump to any conclusions, but maybe the Kings were right to trade Cousins? Not necessarily that they got everything they should have gotten back in return, because I don't think they did. But the fact that he kind of fits that player role where maybe he can't ever win. He can't ever win because people can't get along with him. He's too much of a distraction. That they're never going to succeed. I guess there's a chance that could be the case. Like I said, it's still really, really early. The Pelicans are still, I guess you can say, technically battling for the 8th seed, although they're even behind Sacramento in the standings right now at 25-40. The Kings are 25-39. They're four games back of the Nuggets are the Kings, and 4.5 are the Pelicans of the Nuggets. So I don't think either team will make the playoffs, and they'll both have lottery picks. So as far as the Kings, maybe they were right to trade him. Not that they should have gotten what they did for him, but the fact that he just maybe not be able to be one of those guys that you can build around and win with. And given that they were probably going to have to give him a contract extension in the summertime, potentially it could have been a better move for the Kings, and it might be. But the jury's still out. It's still really, really early. You have to give these guys some time to adjust to each other, to learn and adapt and build pieces around each other. So I guess we'll really see maybe even like the All-Star break next year if they can really turn it around and have some relevancy in New Orleans and build towards a playoff spot and get some more pieces around these two towers they have. Then potentially it could be a good move, but right now it's not really starting out great. The Pelicans have lost 2 in a row. They've only won 4 of their last 10 games, and only 2 in the Cousins era, one of which he wasn't even a member for. So it's not really doing too well for the Pelicans right now. But before we take our goodbye, where Draymond's getting a little bit, you want to make advances, you make things more entertaining. Why would you change it back? It's only for a half, though. It's not like they did it for the whole entire season. It's only for one half. As far as making an impact on the game, I really don't see that being the case. I can see how it might be a little funny, a little confusing, like kind of like, wait, I just noticed there's no music playing right now. Like what's going on here? What's happening? I don't know anything about this. I can see how it can maybe throw you off a little bit, but making an impact on the game, I really don't see that being the case. The second half went back to normal, everything was hunky dory. I think it was just maybe one of those things that had you a little confused, and I don't think it made a huge impact on the game. I think it was just Draymond Green definitely not afraid to speak his mind. So one more quick thing before we end the show. Kim Anderson, he's the head coach at Missouri. Well, not so much anymore. He's being asked to leave and step down as the men's basketball coach just after 3 seasons. Anderson took over in 2014 after Frank Haith left for the Tulsa opening. He went 19-44 in his first 2 seasons, and this season they are 7-23. The school asked him to leave at the end of the season. He's going to be able to coach in the SEC tournament upcoming, but at 7-23, I don't think Missouri's going to be going anywhere soon. He said, this decision has been difficult for me personally because of the disrespect I have for Kim. That's what the athletic director, Jim Sturck, said in a statement. I know how hard he and his staff have been working to turn this program around over the last 3 seasons. However, the lack of on-court success has resulted in a significant drop in interest around our program, and we cannot afford to have that continue for another year. So basically he's saying, we can't bring anyone in because we're not doing too well. We kind of have to let you go because we can't let the players go. This is something that happens all the time in sports. Missouri were pretty good in basketball a few years before that. Remember, they were the number 2 seed one year in the tournament, then they lost in the first round. But since then, Missouri really haven't been able to been relevant in college basketball. So hopefully they can turn things around. The SEC's tough. Kentucky every season. Florida's good. Vanderbilt's never an easy out. Texas A&M's competitive. So Missouri, hopefully they can right the ship and turn things around. But Kim Anderson will not be part of that regime anymore. That's going to be it for the show, guys. I'd like to thank you once again for listening. My name is Ben Brown, signing off here at the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. We will see you guys next time, and have a good day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.